So let's take a look at the Johnson County War. This could appear in your exam as a consequence question, a narrative question, how this video is being laid out, or an importance question on how the Johnson County War impacted homesteading. So the beginning of our story, was wealthy cattle barons who had big herds of cattle were using the open range, and they took control of large swathes of land in Wyoming. They often pushed out homesteaders, those local farmers with 160-acre plots of land. We've discussed this previously in our second Law and Order video. The big cattle barons, were pushing out smaller ranchers, so cowboys that maybe had a few cattle in a herd. After the harsh winter of 1886 to 87, these large cattle barons started to accuse homesteaders of rustling their cattle, stealing them. But local law courts didn't really get involved with these disputes over rustling because they were hard to prove. So the cattle barons would send in their own law enforcement in the form of vigilantes to deal with homesteaders. This leads to our short-term cause of the Johnson County War, John Averill and Ella Watson being shot and killed because they were accused of stealing some cattle. This leads to the development or event of the story. Well, the WSGA, who was representing these large cattle barons, those ones that had just killed Jim Averill and Ella Watson, sent in 23 gunmen to hunt down more homesteaders who they believed had been rustling their cattle. They surrounded something called the KC Ranch, where they believed homesteaders were held up waiting for the attack, and these gunmen managed to kill 2 of the homesteaders. The local sheriff didn't like this violence was going down and was on the side of the homesteaders, these small farmers. So he gathered a posse to go and meet these 23 gunmen and try and protect the homesteaders who they were hunting. However, the US Army caught wind and sent in soldiers to try and stop this conflict before it got out of hand. This leads to our consequence, the end of the story. Well, the power of cattle barons declined because ranching changed for the better. There was more fencing and in the enclosure of land as cattle owners decided to concentrate on the quality of their meat rather than the quantity. So smaller ranches reduce further conflict. However, there is a negative to the consequence because the cattlemen who had sent in these gunmen were never punished. Nobody was ever accused or found guilty for killing any homesteaders. The trial was biased, unfair and favoured the wealthy, and it was often delayed, and all charges were dropped, showing how the rich could still control the legal system in the American West.